Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Tonight's author, Nicola Harrison, was born in England. She received her BA in literature at UCLA in California before moving to New York City and earning her Master in Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Stony Brook. She's a member of the Writers' Room, has short stories published in Southampton Review and the Gilmer Train. And let me just admit this person. Glimmer Train, articles in Los Angeles Magazine and Orange Coast Magazine. She was the fashion and style staff writer for Forbes and has a weekly column at Lucky Magazine. She is also the founder of a personal styling business called Harrison Style. So I tried to style myself up a little bit today. So welcome, Nicola. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks so much for having me.
We'll let you get started.
Great. It's funny, it's sort of sad that we have to do these Zoom events and we can't do them in person, but I actually just moved to California from New York. So in some ways, it's very cool that we can do these Zoom events because I'm across the other side of the country right now. So I'm really happy to be here and be able to talk to you all. So it seems, I hear that most of you have read the book, but if there's anyone here who hasn't read the book yet, I'll give you a little idea of what it's about. So Montauk, my Montauk, is set in 1938, and it follows a story of Beatrice Bordeaux, who comes from a modest background, and at the request of her husband, she is going to spend the summer of 1938 out in Montauk with the other wives, while the husbands kind of go back and forth to the city, and they're all going to stay at the Montauk Manor. And I should add that Beatrice's marriage is not all that stable, but instead of getting in with these high society women, she finds herself drawn to the locals. And as her life gets entwined with the Montauk locals' lives, things get a little complicated, as many of you know who've read the book. So you may be wondering why or how a girl from England ends up writing about a little tiny fishing village all the way at the end of Long Island. So I grew up in England, in Hampshire, which is about an hour south of London. And I moved to Southern California when I was 14 with my family. And I went to university out here. And then after that, I moved to New York. And I got married in New York, and we ended up getting a little summer house out in Montauk, and so we'd spend the weekends out in Montauk. And so I really fell in love with Montauk then, and it was much quieter and much different than it is now. I mean, I think that Montauk has done a good job of maintaining its small town feel and character, and they don't have a bunch of Starbucks there, so they've maintained it. But even when we first got the house, it was even more low key and quiet and quaint, and not the very popular spot that it is now. And so that's really when I fell in love with Montauk. And it was funny because we bought our house from a local lobster fisherman named Billy, and he was selling and moving his family down to Florida. And so when we first got the house, we would go into town and we would, talk. We'd go buy a bottle of wine and we'd talk to the guy who owned the store, and we'd go to the fish market and we'd be talking to him, and they'd say, "Oh, okay, you're new to the area. So which one is your house?" And we'd say, "Oh, it's the little house up on the hill by the golf course." And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's Billy's house." And everyone would be like, you live in Billy's house." And for years afterwards, it was still Billy's house. And I don't have the house anymore, but it probably still is Billy's house. And so that just got me thinking, and I just really loved that sense of loyalty to Billy, the local lobster fisherman. and I love that sense of community and strong loyalty to him. So that's what got me thinking about setting a story there and delving into some of these characters who live there year round, and then the clash of people who come for the summer. So I set my novel in 1938 because it was an interesting time. It was right before World War II, and it was also the year of the great hurricane that ripped its way up the East Coast. And what did I want to say about that? Oh yeah, and so as I started doing my research about it, I started I learned a lot about Carl Fisher, who, as many of you know, if you're Long Island locals, Carl Fisher was very, very influential, the most influential developer to do with Montauk. And first he bought land in Florida and developed that, and it turned out to be the Miami that we know today. But of course, back then it was nothing but mangroves and swampland, and everyone thought he was insane he was like, no one's gonna want to live there or develop there. And he turned it into Miami. And so then he set his eyes on Montauk, which back then it was nothing but just open fields and cattle. You know, these cows had the most amazing views of the ocean. And there was the fishing village. And so he just started developing Montauk with the Montauk Manor, which he called the Castle by the Sea, as his centerpiece. And it's interesting that the Montauk Manor is actually a Tudor style building, which I always think is a little out of place in a fishing village, but or a fishing town. But he said the reason why he wanted the Montauk Manor to be in this Tudor style is because when he first went there and he saw all this open land, it reminded him of like the moors of England. And so that's why the Montauk Manor is as it is. So that was some of the research that I did and learned about as I was writing this book. And of course, I'm so grateful to libraries, because for me as an author, that's always the first place that I start doing my research. So for this novel, Montauk, I just had this germ of an idea, and then I went to the Montauk Library and I pored over all of the local history books and all the books about Montauk and everything. And so that's really where I got my start, just getting some ideas together. But some of my favorite research that I did for this book was interviewing some of the locals of Montauk, the longtime locals. And I spent a lot of time with a gentleman named Henry Ossemers, who is the historian for the lighthouse. And so he gave me tours of the lighthouse, and I read his books, and that was one great resource. And another, I was put in touch with a local couple who were like in their 90s and had lived in Montauk their whole lives. And the gentleman told me that he remembered when the New Yorkers would first start coming to Montauk, the summer guests. And he said he was a teenager, and him and his friends would go down to the clubs and to the restaurants, and they would be the entertainment for the evening. And they would do things, to make a few bucks here and there. And so they would do things like tie themselves up in potato sacks and jump into the deep end of the swimming pool and get timed for how long it would take them to come to the surface. And so, and another thing he told me about was that they would participate in this greasy pig contest, which I thought I have to include that in the book. So I did. So that was some of my favorite research, was getting some really, hands-on details about what really happened back in the day. And so let's see, what else did I want to tell you about? Some of my research. And of course, the Great Storm of 1938 is a pivotal part of this novel. And it was one of the most devastating storms ever to hit the East Coast. Winds were 130 miles per hour. Most of Montauk was destroyed, and cars and boats were piled up against houses. And I have some images that maybe now's a good time to show you. So I'm gonna share my screen.
But can you give us an idea how long it took you from start to finish for the novel?
Yeah, so it took me about 4 years to write it. I didn't have, this is my first novel, so I didn't have an agent or a publisher, so I didn't have a deadline. I was just working on the book, and so it took me about 4 years. Now I have an agent and a publisher, and I have deadlines, so I'm learning to write a lot faster. 4 years is a long time in publishing world, as I'm learning. Great. So these first images are some of the advertising that Carl Fisher did to promote Montauk. The one on the right, the colorful one, is the poster that he put up like on the trains and around New York to really lure people to go out to Montauk. It was like the new destination. And he said Miami in the winter and Montauk in the summer. And so that was his sort of ad campaign. And then the one on the left was an article in a magazine, just, you know, showing people how luxurious it is and relaxing. And I just think those are really kind of cool to see. Okay, the next one here is an image of the Montauk Manor. And I think this is from 1923. So you can see the Tudor style and horses. And then this is just a snapshot that I took of it, you know, much more recently, with the cherry blossoms out front. And there's actually a better picture. Okay, and then this is some of the devastation of the storm of 1938, the fishing village. Now, many of these houses were actually built from, you know, wood from fishing crates and things like that. So they really were unable to stand up to the storm, and it just got really devastated. And these houses literally just moved out to sea, some of them. Here is an image of White's Pharmacy. Just the window got completely knocked in, and so this is them sort of trying to put it back together after the storm. Here's a recent picture of the lighthouse, which many of you have, I'm sure, have seen, and the house. And then the gentleman that I mentioned earlier, Henry Osmers, he's on the left-hand side. He's the historian at the lighthouse. So on the left here, this is when I was doing some research for the book. So the book took me about 4 years to write. And then once you get an agent and a publisher, I mean, it took almost 2 years from the time of getting a book deal to it actually coming out and being available in the store. So this was like, you know, six years ago, probably, when I was first doing my research. And then on the right is a picture from my book tour last summer, and it's the same gentleman on the right. And actually, that the guy on the left is he now is sort of unofficial lighthouse keeper. Even though the lighthouse is now automated and they don't need a lighthouse keeper, he actually resides in the house where Thomas in my book lived, and he sort of just keeps an eye on things and makes sure no one's trespassing. And I think he helps raise money and things like that for the lighthouse. There's the another angle on a gray day. And that's sort of the view from the light. This is what I picture when I was writing Beatrice looking out of Thomas's window. This is the view from the lighthouse bedroom down to the ocean. And that's just the novel and the lighthouse. Now, I wanted to tell you a funny story. So that's the cover, as you know, because you've seen it. So when the book was first going to come out, I was very nervous. I'm like, you know, I wrote this book, spent 4 years writing it. This is my baby. I love it so much. And so I was so nervous that they would come up with this cover that I wouldn't like. But they came up with this cover, and this was the original cover that they showed me. And I loved it. I thought it was very beautiful, and I thought it captured the story. And so this was the cover that it was going to be. But then and this is all new to me because I'm a first-time author. So then when they started sending the book to booksellers, a very large bookseller, one of the biggest, the person in charge said, I don't like that cover. It doesn't look historical enough. I want you to change it. And so the publishers pretty much had to do what she asked because she's a big account. And so they came up with some other covers. And so these were some of the other options that they were working with. And my publisher was amazing. They really listened to my input. Some of them I felt didn't look 30s enough. Anyway, so these were some different versions of the covers, and then we actually came up with the one that we ended up with, that one. So that was a process that was very strange and interesting to me. So those are my images. Now, how do I stop share? Go back. Okay. So I know some of you had some questions, so I'd love to answer some of them.
Okay, it seems like, Nicola, your images, I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this. You're kind of frozen. I mean, we can hear you fine, which is wonderful. So that part is good.
I can see her.
You can,
I
yeah, I
can
can
see her.
see her, but is she moving or is it just
Yes,
me?
I can see her moving
Oh,
and
okay.
talking.
Well, I guess it's just me.
Okay.
Um, so, well, I'm glad you were able to unmute yourself because I don't know what's going on with my computer. But let me share some of the questions that came in for those that asked me ahead of time. So you went to was it the Stony Brook writing program that you participated in for
Yes.
your master's?
Yes.
And we're just wondering how you found that, if you found that very inspirational, and
Yeah.
I guess maybe there are some potential writers out there that, and they're
Yeah,
just wondering about that as a resource.
it was a wonderful program. They actually have a summer program, so you don't have to commit to going to get your master's degree. They have a summer program that's open to anyone who's interested in writing, and you go for, I think it's 2 weeks, and you stay on campus in the dorms. You can also not stay on campus. You can, if you live nearby, you can commute. But that's what I did initially. I wanted some time away just to write and focus on my writing, and so I went for this summer program, and there are some amazing instructors there, all published authors who are working currently, and you do workshops with them, and they do readings at night. And then, so after that 2-week program, I learned that they also had a master's program. And so I continued on with that. And I actually did the classes in New York because they have a New York campus, but you can also do them in Southampton. And I found it to be a wonderful program. Now, interestingly, I wasn't working on this novel at that time. I was working, and I wasn't published yet. I was working on a memoir. So in my personal life, I actually lost my brother to a car accident when I was 18 and he was 22. And so that was certainly something that came up in this book. But at the time, I was writing a memoir about that. And I didn't end up getting it published or doing anything with it. It's sort of sitting in a drawer. But when I went to write Montauk, I wanted the character to have experienced some kind of loss. And I was writing about her having lost another family member. And it just wasn't really feeling real to me. It didn't feel authentic somehow. And then I thought to myself, why am I doing this? I've had this experience myself. Why not just go there? So I sort of allowed myself to go there and incorporate that into this book. And so that's what I ended up doing.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing that personal aspect. I think that's really what makes writing more real is when people put themselves into it like that.
Right.
So, if anybody has any other questions that they would like to ask. Oh, I'm here. Do you still have the screen share on your side there, Nicola? Because I'm frozen in that.
I don't think I do, but I see people in the waiting room. Can I? Should I?
Yeah, you can let them in because I think as a co-host you can let them in, and I might jump on another computer because the one I'm currently on is not working very well.
So. I have the questions that you sent me earlier. I can just quickly pull those up.
Yes. Well, some of them I think you've already answered, but yes,
there's some that somebody asked, and this is a good one. Somebody said, did you know what the ending would be when you started writing the book, and what was the general audience reaction to the ending? And so the ending is definitely something that came up a lot during the book tour and during these talks that I've done. And I kind of knew it. I kind of knew that it would. So, so it was interesting. People have asked me about this a lot. So I knew what the ending was going to be when I first started writing this book. I just kind of knew that it wasn't going to be a book that got tied up with a neat bow at the end and was a happily ever after. And so I just kind of knew that. And I'm not I would say, for me as a writer, there tend to be people who plan everything out as a writer, and they know exactly what they're going to write, and they know exactly what scenes are going to be in the book all the way through. And I think that's probably a great way to be as a writer, but that's not me. And then there are people called pantsers who fly by the seat of their pants, and they don't even know what they're going to write at all until they're writing. And that's not me either. I'm somewhere in the middle. I tend to know what the beginning, middle, and end is going to be. And then, but I don't know everything that's going to happen in between. So with this, I knew how it was going to start. I knew what the middle would be, and I kind of knew what the ending was going to be. But I'm in a writing workshop. On Thursday nights, I meet with a group of about 7 other writers, and we share our pages with each other, and it just kind of holds us accountable, and we get each other's feedback. And so when I was writing this, a couple of the people in my workshop really wanted a good, happy ending. And so they like, you should try it like this, or you should try it like that. So just to be, you know, a good sport, I did try the ending a couple of different ways, but I ended up coming back to my original ending. And I think the reason is that I believe that a happy ending is when the character learns something about themselves in the end. And I really do think that Beatrice learned something about herself in the end. She learned how to be loved. She learned that she was deserving of love, and she knew what she needed in her life to be happy. I think at the beginning of the book, she didn't know that. So even though it wasn't the happiest of endings, she could go forward with her life and know exactly what she needs to be happy. So that's my thoughts on the ending. Let's see.
Yeah, I was going to say that to me, it was kind of like a coming of age. I used to be the teen librarian, so I saw very kind of a little bit of that coming of age, you know, just maturing
Yeah.
aspect in the novel as well.
Yeah. Well, also back then, you know, they would get married and have kids so young. It's like they were still kids, basically. So, you know, so there, it is kind of like a coming of age, even after she's married, and, you know, she's still figuring out who she is, even though she's already married.
Okay.
Let's see, a couple of other questions. Somebody asked, who broke into B's hotel room? So it's a good question. I left that a little vague on purpose. I didn't anticipate, I don't think that Beatrice knew who broke into her room. And so therefore, we as a reader also don't know. But the idea is that Harry was, you know, sleeping around, and which she obviously knows. And then, but he's really like too close to home. So it was obviously messing around with somebody at the hotel, and it was just adds insult to injury that it's somebody that somebody within the group. She doesn't even know who it is, but within this group that she was asked to go and get in with these women, and then there's somebody potentially in that group who is messing around with her husband. So it was intentionally left vague.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, did you do any research on that kind of society, or did you kind of base it on, you know, modern rich people who summer out in Montauk?
It was a little bit of both, but there definitely were some parallels with wealthy people who summer out in Montauk and the Hamptons now. Yeah, I was definitely touching on that. And also on sort of the way Montauk is changing now. That's currently happening, but I was putting that in the past a little because, you know, I do feel very nostalgic for these, for how Montauk, how it used to be. And so, yeah, I was definitely touching on what's going on right now.
Thank you.
Sure. Another question someone asked was, what are you currently writing? So I have a novel coming out next summer, which I'm working on copy edits, but it's pretty much done and with the publisher now. And it's called The Showgirl. And this one takes place in the 1920s. And it's about a very vivacious, bold young woman. And she desperately wants to become a showgirl, a Ziegfeld girl, actually. And so it takes place in New York City and also in the Adirondacks. So that's been a lot of fun to write, and very different. I mean, it's still historical, so it's in the same vein as Montauk, but it's very different. The characters are very different. So that's really fun. And I've just seen the cover for that book, which is beautiful. I'm very excited. But I am currently working on a third novel, which is in very early days, but that one will take place just after the Second World War, and that one takes place in Laguna Beach, California. It's always interesting to write books when you know they're not going to come out for like 2 years out down the road.
When will the Showgirl come out? In 21?
Yes, next summer, 2021.
Next summer. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let me see if there are any
Question?
other questions, or if anyone has any other questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is your writing process? What is your day like when you're writing, when you're in the middle of a book? How much time do you spend on it, or every day? Is it like a job? Is it your job? I mean, I don't know.
Yes, it is now. It is now. When I first published Montauk, I also had a personal styling business, which you mentioned, and I've just recently sort of wrapped that up because now I'm writing full time, which is my dream. It's been my dream job, so now that's what I'm doing. And so, like I said, I just moved to California, but previously I would go to the writer's room, which is it's a workspace just for writers in New York City. And it's a big loft space, and it's just all desks, and it's totally silent. And you have to be a writer to work there. And it's just very inspiring because you're on the busy streets of New York City, and then you go up in the elevator into this totally silent room, and it's just all writers tapping away on their keyboards. And so there's nothing else to do. There's no distractions. So it was a great place to write. I'm gonna have to find a new spot like that one of these days. But yes, I write. I try to write every day. In normal times, it's when my kids are my son is in school. I have a 10-year-old and I have a 20-month-old. So usually I write during my 10-year-old's school hours, and I treat it like a job. So it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like a lot of fun, but I treat it like a job. So I'm writing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the right profession in these times right now. You can you can still do your job without.
Exactly. Only the kids could be in school.
Is your new new book, is it also a Harper publication, or did you have a new publishing company, or is it?
Yeah, so I'm with St. Martin's Press, and
Okay.
And I'm still with St. Martin's Press. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
How hard was it to get an agent to start before the first book?
Yeah. So it wasn't too bad, actually. I was expecting, I've heard horror stories, but it wasn't too bad. I think Montauk probably drew them in, the idea of Montauk, because it's such a hot spot right now. But my approach to find an agent was I thought of books that I had read that I loved. And then I just looked up who the agent was, because I thought, well, if they like that book and I liked it, then maybe they'd like my book.
Right.
So I ended up finding a wonderful agent, and she's been great and helpful. And it wasn't too bad. I had a few different offers.
Great.
And then the agent then found me the publisher at St. Martin's.
Great.
So
Did
I
you
would say your genres, you've kind of found your niche in historical fiction. Is that what you're planning on
Yeah.
sticking with for a time?
Yeah. Yes. That just seems to be what I love to write at the moment. So I think that's probably what I'm going to be writing going forward. But who knows? Maybe I'll set something more contemporary down the road. But right now, that's what I'm enjoying writing. I like being able to take aspects of what's going on now in the world and incorporating things into the past. It's kind of fun to mix those two things.
Well, I will say I really did like the cover that they finally chose for you.
Me too. I think I liked it. I liked it better than the first one in the end. I thought it was really eye-catching. The first one that they showed me, I liked it, but it was more subtle. And I think when you want to sell books, you want something that's going to catch people's eye when they walk into the bookstore.
Right. And we were lucky that, a lot of people I know read the ebook version and also the audio that was put out. So that makes it very, very available and accessible. So we like that.
Yeah.
I will say that I forgot to read. I wanted to read something from Library Journal. You got, very good reviews, I would say.
Yes.
And their final verdict, which sold us, was It's full of substance and delightful characters with intriguing and intricate lives. So I would say bravo, especially on your first time out of the gate. You know, put a lot of good ideas together. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was really nice. That was my first trade review that I got, so that was really nice.
so does anybody else have any questions they wanted to share this evening?
Well, I just want to say that I think the character really became very real to me when she was talking about the loss of her brother, and in her scenes with Thomas, as they got more involved with each other, and also her scenes with the woman who washed clothes. I really like.
Oh, Elizabeth, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just really felt closer to her. I felt she was very alive in those scenes.
Oh, thank you. That's great to know. It does really help to sort of put yourself into the book. It makes you sort of lose yourself into the world a little bit and really sort of take on the character. So that's great to know that worked for you. Thank you.
Well, now that you're in California, maybe that you'll get some of the movie execs to to jump on this. It's a beautiful locale.
Right?
It's got, the beautiful people in it and the beautiful setting and the beautiful people. I think that would be intriguing.
Yeah.
I
It was
could see
funny
that as a possibility.
right when this book was in production, it hadn't come out yet. The TV show The Affair came out. I don't know if any of you had heard of it or seen it.
Yes.
And I thought, oh no, someone's written a TV show about Montauk. Oh no. So then of course I had to watch the whole thing, and I realized it's fine. It was nothing to do with my book. It's present day. It's totally different. But I don't know if anyone saw at the very end. I watched all these seasons, and at the very end, one of the characters is on a train going back out to Montauk, and she's holding a book that says Montauk on the front, and it looked a lot like this. I thought, oh, I wonder if they got inspiration from me.
So we did have, I'm wondering if Stephanie, she was one of the participants today. She is comes from a fishing family. Are you with us there anywhere, Stephanie?
Hi.
Here. I'm just wondering if you can give us what we're going to call you the real local, since you get down and dirty with the fish. I wonder if you had anything you wanted to share. I'm sure she could give you some good tidbits if you ever
I wish I
need fishing stories.
I wish I could have been in touch with you to fact check everything when I was writing this.
Well, I can tell you, it rang true to me. I mean, the locals, and they were sort of a little suspicious of Beatrice in the beginning, and then they kind of came around. To me, I really don't like it when I read something and there's like a false note to me. Mm-hmm. It kind of takes me out of the story, but your book didn't have that. So it was, everything was plausible. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Where is your family? Are they in Montauk?
We're on the North Fork in Mattituck. Okay. So we're kind of across Peconic Bay.
Okay, great.
Yeah. But I kind of like recognize that fishing village, it's like it's a very small insular society.
Yes.
And you got that part of it, I think, too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Did you have the opportunity to talk to anybody who actually lived through the hurricane?
Yes, I did. The couple that I mentioned earlier, they did. And I think he said he was in high school, and it's hard to remember what was real and what's research and what's fiction from the book. But he was in high school and he wrote it out in East Hampton. But yeah, I can't really remember all the details now. But I remember him telling me he was fine. His family was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I know everybody out here, on all of Eastern Long Island. It was quite the devastation all
And
around.
what I thought was fascinating, which I included in the book briefly, was that the Nepean stretch connecting Montauk to Amagansett was completely flooded. So Montauk was an island for a period of time. So the emergency vehicles couldn't get in and out to even help. And I mean, I can see that that's totally plausible, because when you're driving that stretch, it's just such a narrow stretch of land between the ocean and the Sound that you can completely see how, if the water rises, that would be underwater. But how isolating to feel to be cut off like that back then. So I spoke to some people, but mostly I read about it. I read about personal accounts in historical books.
Right. Yeah, we've done a number of oral histories, trying to document that and to save those stories. And it's very interesting then to see them crop up. And we actually have one of our patrons, Mary, who I'm sure is still there, has just, have you finished your book, Mary? Are you still there, Mary?
I'm in my last go, I hope, of editing right as of today. So I'm hoping by the end of next month, but I don't have an agent yet. So I still got a couple of years to go. But
What's the book?
the book is about there's one woman lighthouse keeper. There was one woman lighthouse keeper. It's historical fiction based on the life of Stella Prince, who was the only woman lighthouse keeper at Horton Point Lighthouse in Southold.
Oh,
So
wow.
it is based on her life. I do have the Southold Historical Society. I did a narrated PowerPoint for them. And so that's available if anybody wants to look at that. That's the factual research that I uncovered as part of preparing for the book. And but the book is historical fiction. So, but it is based on her life and the facts of her life. So it's been very exciting, and it's a couple of years. I've been working on it for I think 3 years now. So like I said, I think I'm in the final go. My beta readers I got through their feedback, which was terrific. And now it's just my feedback, my final feedback.
That's so good.
It's exciting. Yes, I love it.
Well, we're looking forward to that, and we're certainly looking forward to your Showgirl book, and because I'm sure all of us here, we just love our historical fiction, and
Right.
yes. So thank you again for joining us. If there aren't any more questions, let's see. We will let you enjoy the rest of your evening, and I guess you haven't had your dinner yet, so.
Lynn, Kathleen keeps raising her hand. I don't know if you can see her. She has to unmute. Kathleen
okay.
Newman?
Ask to unmute.
She has
Let's
to
see.
unmute.
She's kind of has to
I can't, yeah.
Can you
Oh,
hear
there
me?
she is.
okay.
Yes.
Kathleen, did you have a question?
Yeah, one of the things I found really interesting was the way you use the actual historical people. And there were 3 lighthouse keepers at that time. And I know you found their names and changed them a little bit. And I wondered whether you had to get permission to do that, or they're no longer living. So, but I found that, an interesting aspect of the writing process.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have to get permission, but I certainly read about them. There's, I think it was Henry Osmers, the man that I mentioned, who has written a book all about the lighthouse and the keepers, and he has accounts from the granddaughter of one of them about what it was like for her to actually live there, and that was such valuable information. I mean, she talked about things like the thick fog and the sound of the fog noise and foghorn and all that.
But can you take people like that? I mean, Thomas, for example, that was actually his name. His first name was Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take him and make him the person he was when indeed he was, he never had an affair, or I don't think.
Right.
You're allowed that liberty?
As long as you're not using, their real first and last name and actually basing it on a character. I just took little bits and pieces, and then I put a note in the front of the book saying this is all fictional characters. So therefore, you don't have to ask for permission or anything like that.
that was interesting to me. Just that they were three light keepers. That was
Right.
interesting.
Right.
All right, well, I think we will let you go. And thank you again so
Thank
much for
you.
joining us. We appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing more from you. And if you're ever if you come back to the East Coast,
I will be visiting.
you'll have to check out the North Fork, because we're even more charming than the South Fork.
But we're not biased.
I love the North
Yes.
Fork.
Just don't come in October, because that's pumpkin season,
I
and
know.
it is deadly.
It's crowded.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
you.
for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Lynn, for putting this together.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right, good night, everybody. Have a good
Bye.
one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.